The House of Commons Committee on International Trade has been meeting throughout the week, hearing from Canadian businesses that have been affected by the steel and aluminum tariffs. One Canadian business owner told the committee Canada should accept the U.S. quotas yesterday. Barry Zekelman is CEO of Zekelman Industries, a Chicago-based steel pipe and tube manufacturer, and he joins me now from Windsor. Hi, Mr. Zekelman. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, hi. How are you? Thanks for having me. And I do want to point out, even though our headquarters is in Chicago, I'm a Canadian, born and raised in Canada. I still live in Canada, and we have operations here. So I'm fighting for Canadian workers as well as our American workers.
Okay, let me ask you about a couple points you made in that fight for Canadian and American workers yesterday in front of the committee. You told the committee that Chrystia Freeland is, quote, out of her league in negotiating these tariffs. What evidence do you have to back that up?
Well, the evidence is how long it's taken, and the very fact that we came to a conclusion on the USMCA that we could have many months ago. So that's the frustrating part. This pain could have been avoided many months ago. That deal was on the table and could have been done, but there was no back and forth and reciprocal talk. It was just Canada said, we're not taking it, and walked away. There was never any putback or suggestion or back and forth in negotiating. I don't want to see the same thing happen on steel and aluminum because there's a deal available and available almost immediately. It could be easily done Monday, and I want to see that deal done so American companies do well, Canadian companies do well, Canadian workers prosper, and that we can get back to business as usual. Now, the quotas that are involved here, you know, the quotas are two-way. It's not just quotas imposed on Canada. Canada will impose quotas on the U.S. as well. And those levels of imports at 2017 levels are easily acceptable to both sides of the equation.
Why, though, would Canada agree to a level of quota or a quota on imports that takes us back instead of allowing for room for growth?
Well, so here's the problem. The U.S. is trying to block illegally traded and flooding imports into its country, as Canada should do as well. Now, imagine a hypothetical scenario. If Canada doesn't agree to quotas with the U.S., in theory, Russian slabs of steel could come into Canada, they could get converted at Stelco, 2 million tons a year, and get flooded into the U.S., thus, circumventing and going around everything the U.S. wanted to achieve. That could potentially happen. The U.S. has to protect against that. Also, bear in mind, we don't want a bunch of U.S. steel flooding into our markets, hurting our Canadian steel mills, if in fact something in the equation changes. So it's not just protection for the U.S., it's protection for Canada as well.
But if Canada agrees to these quotas, they're agreeing to quotas on tariffs that they feel are illegal. Is that not counterproductive? Why would we ever agree to a quota on a tariff we think shouldn't be there in the first place?
Well, look, I'm just telling you what the state of mind and the playing field is today. You may think they're illegal. You may go fight at the WTO for 3 years. In the meantime, you're talking about consumers in Canada that are all feeling the pain. Look, you can argue that all you want, but this is reality, and this is what's going on the ground today. So to stand with your back up against the wall and say, we're just not going to do it, that's not doing companies like myself any good, the automotive companies here, all of the other steel-consuming companies and that are having these troubles. Deal with it today. You can go argue that after, and you can have those agreements, but let's solve this today.
But doesn't it weaken your argument considerably? If you've agreed to a quota on a tariff that you think is illegal, how would you ever be able to fight that at the WTO? And what about the long-term ramifications of that?
Well, listen, scorched earth. So you're going to sit there and blow up a whole bunch of businesses today because you want to be right at the WTO? That doesn't help the people in Canada at all. So I think you need to get to the table, solve this right away. What's the big deal with quotas? 2017 levels were good. Listen, I'm a steel consumer, one of the largest in Canada. So I'm happy with those levels. I don't know why anyone else wouldn't be happy with those levels. It's much better than we're at today. Again, in theory, you may be right. At the WTO, you may be right. I've been to the WTO. I've fought these fights. I've fought trade fights all my life. It takes 2, 3, 4 years. In the meantime, the Canadian businesses are gone. They don't want to put up with the hassle. They don't need the inconvenience, and they'll relocate to the U.S. And there we are. Oh, we won the fight 2 years from now? Great. 3 years from now? Yeah, everyone already disappeared. The neighborhood's empty.
This is a different, I mean, just to get back to the reason that these tariffs were applied, according to the U.S., I mean, they're essentially deeming this because of a national security threat. Are you worried about the precedent that sets? I mean, think about, this isn't just steel. What other products could they then say, oh, well, look what Canada capitulated. They agreed to quotas. Let's just slap 232s on something else.
Listen, this mechanism was used by the U.S. to start to change the global trade playing field. okay, and to renegotiate trade agreements, many of which needed to be renegotiated, and some of which needed to be pulled out of or not done at all. So that's the method the U.S. has chosen. Whether you like it or not, it's reality.
But
So
didn't you think Canada would be exempt? I take your point that this is happening.
Yes. Look, Donald Trump has no issues with Canada, okay? There were a couple products back and forth, and we have issues with the U.S. That's fine. So Canada is not the threat. The whole notion of national security, we all know that's not the case. Canada is not a national security threat to the U.S., but it was used as a tool to get a new USMCA. Great, I applaud them for getting that. And I do want to say something. I don't speak for Bob Lighthizer, all right? When I said that he can't negotiate with Freedom or he doesn't like, I'm sure he doesn't, okay? That's my opinion. That certainly didn't come from him.
Has he ever said that to you?
No, he's never said that to me. In fact, there's public statements by him that he gets along with her well. If it was me, I'd be pretty upset. But anyways.
What do you think saying that, though, kind of accomplishes?
Listen, it's my opinion. I'm entitled to it. So saying it, I said it. And I own it. I have no problem with that. And if people are mad at me, so be it.
Are people mad at you? Have you had any reaction?
Yeah, sure. Listen, I've had emails, I'm a terrible Canadian, blah, blah, blah. And I've had emails saying, God bless you, thank you, I couldn't have said it better myself. I would say the overwhelming number are to that effect, but I have had some rather scathing emails, and that's okay. I'll take the heat, and guess what? It doesn't matter to me as long as we get this deal done. I don't care. I care about Canadian workers, I care about Canadian business, I care about U.S. workers. What I don't care about is China, Thailand, South Korea, Vietnam. I mean, those people those countries are absolutely decimating our industry.
I understand what you're saying, and I totally get what you're saying about the here and the now, right? And I get that this is a big problem in the short term. Yeah. But if they are to allow the U.S. to give them any kind of green light to applying 232, to deeming, it's unpredictable, you have to admit, right? If they are to capitulate for that, then does that not set up a more problematic long-term scenario? If you're the government, and take me for a second, if you're the government, you're sitting there, you're not just looking at one aspect of the steel industry, you're looking at the economy as a whole, and even the steel industry as a whole. Is it not a more difficult decision?
Look, you can deal in theoretical circumstances. I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe that'll be exercised at all. I don't believe the U.S. is threatened by Canada. They will be threatened by Canada if Canada is used as a back door for a bunch of steel to come into Canada.
But you thought we would be exempt, and we weren't. They did target us.
I'm sorry?
You thought Canada would be exempt in the first place, and we still got targeted.
Oh, I would have loved them to be exempt, and they would have been exempt if they would have got a new USMCA done. All right, but obviously nobody was talking. It was frozen. All right, they sat there and basically told the U.S. to go pound salt because Canada was so tough. And here we are. We agreed to the sunset. Oh yeah, the deal we could have got 4 months ago. We agreed to a sunset provision of 6 years. We agreed to Chapter 19 dispute resolution being looked at every 6 years. That deal was on the table months before that. In the meantime, we all suffered because nobody was talking. They all just put their backs up against the wall and walked away. And that's what I referred to as the ego portion of that. So I don't want that to happen this time. All right, because they're playing with people's lives here. People are being laid off.
But do you really sincerely think the government isn't taking that into account? Honestly, I mean, do you honestly think that they don't care about people?
Yeah, I honestly think that Trudeau's more worried about getting Canada high than the jobs here. Okay, because that's what everybody's talking about: legal marijuana. All right, so we got to stop that crap, and we got to get back down to protecting the Canadian worker.
Are you politically motivated here, though? Because that sounds pretty personal.
It is personal. I'm pissed off that I got a factory shut down in Welland, Ontario, 120 guys out of work because we're getting inundated with product from Thailand, Korea, Vietnam, and the likes. All right, and I want to get a deal done that blocks out those imports and actually lets us trade back and forth with the U.S. so that I could actually make product there from Canadian steel and ship some of that to the U.S. So,
but doesn't on balance the Prime Minister have to take into account how you're affected, how Stelco's affected, how you know what I mean? They can't just focus on one thing. I get your experience, but
I'm talking about Stelco. Stelco needs to ship product into the U.S. They can't ship it into the U.S. today, so they're having to sell it at discounted rates within Canada.
So they want the Prime Minister to capitulate and agree to quotas?
Absolutely, I think they would easily accept 2017 levels, and there's the ability for there to be a slab exemption, okay, where the U.S. would bring in Canadian slabs, and Stelco wants to ship slabs into the U.S. And the U.S. needs slabs. they'd rather bring in slabs from Canada than from Russia or Brazil. So there are areas where you could cut a deal within the quota system that, that would actually even help Canada more.
Wouldn't no quotas be better overall? If they're able to secure getting rid of the quotas and exemptions from 232, isn't that in the long run the best scenario?
It would be, yes, maybe it would be utopia, but it wouldn't help the U.S. in protecting against product coming into Canada, flooding in, and which would actually hurt me, making its way to the U.S. So the U.S. forcing Canada to have quotas and safeguards.
Is there evidence of all that product flooding in here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Structural tube imports are up like 100% in the last 6 months. All products, they are coming into Canada in much bigger waves, and it's hurting us. So yeah, there's evidence. Listen, I'm telling you about what really goes on the street, okay? This is the real deal. I live it. I breathe it. And I see my workers that I've had to lay off and furlough a factory for 3 years now because of imports coming into Canada. So while, yes, utopia would be no quota, we're putting a quota on the U.S. as well. So yes, maybe it's utopia and it's great, but that isn't the real world. And I'm telling you right now, for certain, the U.S. will not agree to no quotas.
How many people have you had to lay off?
Well, 120 are gone in Welland. 120 people.
Since the tariffs were applied?
No, but even before that, because of the imports. Since the tariffs were applied, we've kept it a little even. We've been working at reduced levels, so they have less hours. I'm certainly way reduced in profits because of it.
But you haven't laid off someone specifically because of the tariffs?
No, I'm giving them less hours. I care for my people. I don't want to send them home so they can't pay their grocery bill or their mortgage. Yeah, I actually care for that.
And I take that, I understand that, but with respect, you're trying to say that what the government's actions are doing is causing you to lay people off.
Ma'am, it's coming. Okay, you can only do it for so long. And I can only eat the tariffs for so long. And my suppliers can only help for so long. It's coming, which will happen. 40% of the product I make in Harrow, Ontario goes to the U.S. All right, it isn't that high anymore, and if that goes away, we're going to have significant problems there. I've already seen it with other people I talk to in the industry that I know who have closed plants and laid off a vast amount of the workers. Fortunately, I have plants on both sides, so I'm a little bit mitigated from that. But this is very real and very now, and we need to solve it now.
Have you made your case to the federal government outside of your committee appearance or what you're saying right now?
I think I've been pretty vocal.
No, but have you offered to talk with Minister Freeland or Prime Minister Trudeau?
I've asked to talk to Minister Freeland, and we've traded emails back and forth and a couple phone calls, and she's committed to meeting with me, and it's never happened. So no, as a matter of fact, when Prime Minister Trudeau came down here, all right, to my area, who was 15 minutes away from me, he chose to go to a tomato canning factory rather than my steel plant to meet with me. That's where he went for his photo op.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. But thanks a lot, Mr. Zekelman. Really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.